In part 2 of the elevation box, we're going to teach you how to build relative bottom and relative top marks. Building relative bottom points is extremely important to make sure that one, all of the tags on your drawing are referenced from the proper reference points, and two, that when you export your drawing, that all the entities in your drawing are actually at the right height in the BIM model. For example, in this tutorial, we're going to pretend that we have got a floor, and that floor is going to be at 20 foot. To represent that, we're actually going to take a rectangular slab. We're going to create it to be 400 by 400. And we're going to say that the top of this slab will be at 20 foot in absolute zero elevation. So the top of this slab is at 20 foot in absolute zero elevation. Now what we're going to do is we're going to want to put objects on the drawing above this slab. Let's say it's at the third floor. And we're going to want to reference all of our elevation tags from the duct we place above it, from the slab below it. So we're going to reference it to the floor. However, we want to make sure that when we export this drawing, that duct, if we put it 10 feet above a 20 foot high slab, the duct should be 30 foot in the BIM model. So to do this, we need to make sure we create the proper reference points. Currently, when we go to grab a fitting, I'm going to use rectangular duct, and we go to the elevation box, you can see that Practicat is showing the top, center, and bottom of the object we're holding in reference to absolute zero. Now, if we create relative marks, Practicat is going to give us some different information. So what we're going to do is we're going to escape. We're going to clear out the fitting, and I'm going to put the current elevation back at 0. We're going to create a new elevation mark in the elevation box. To do that, we move our cursor over to the left side, and once you see that white arrow, you click once with your left mouse click, and that will create a new relative mark. And we actually defined this value right here, which says 0, as the relative mark. And often we train the users to use relative mark 0 as your reference 0. For example, in this particular tutorial, we're going to say that there's a 20 foot slab, and that's going to be the 0 for our drawing. It's going to be what we call the relative bottom. Everything in the drawing we tag is going to be referenced to this point. So what we need to do is create a 20 foot mark, and we need to create it as relative bottom. To do that, I'm just going to click on the notation here, and I'm going to type in 20 foot and hit enter. Now, right away, we don't see the relative mark, and the reason why is because it's actually now at the top of my elevation box. As we add relative marks and new elevation points, they're going to go above and below our current elevation. So Practicat is going to give us this browser that allows us to scroll up and scroll down. We also have some search functions inside the elevation box as well. You'll notice that we can zoom in to elevation points, or we can zoom out. Obviously, if we continue to hit the minus and zoom out, we will finally see our 20 foot and 0 foot together. There's also a top 0, bottom 0. That is designed to show you the relative top and the relative bottom, and it centers the elevation box to those two views. We're going to show that later in these tutorials. And the one that we use the most is the elevation marks view. If you click on this, it simply centers the elevation box from the lowest point you've created and the highest point you've created. It's a fit to view for your elevation box. Now that we've created the 20 foot relative mark, which is going to be used as our new 0, we now need to set it as relative bottom. To do that, we're going to click on the yellow circle on the bottom. Notice there's two. Going to click on the bottom one. When I do that, Practicat turns it to blue. Blue represents relative bottom. The opposite of this would be relative top. If I click on the blue icon again, Practicat will reset to the two yellow circles, and if I click on the top one, it will turn green. Green represents relative top. To keep this tutorial simple to start, we're only going to work from relative bottom during these exercises. So I'm going to click on it again to reset it and then turn it blue. Now, once we've created a relative bottom in the software, all the entities we select will now show us how far they are, not just from absolute zero or our current elevation, but also how far we are from relative bottom. For example, if I were to come and grab a piece of rectangular duct, and I were to put the absolute bottom at 30 foot, you could see the Practicad showing me the top of duct is 31 foot 6 inches from absolute zero. The bottom of duct is 30 feet above absolute zero. Over here, it's showing us the TCB for top, center, and bottom of the entity we're holding in reference to relative bottom. So you can see that the bottom of duct is 10 foot above 20 foot, or our relative bottom. And the top of duct is 11 foot 6 inches above our 20 foot relative bottom mark. Now when we go to place objects on the drawing and we use relative bottoms, we generally ignore these values here. We know that we want this duct to be 15 feet above the floor, or relative bottom. So what we do is we come right here and just type in 15 foot, and then we hit enter and we put it on the drawing. Now, when we go to tag, our tags actually reference the entities we click on from absolute zero. Not absolute zero, but relative mark zero. For example, you can see here we've got a tag called elevation 0 no leader. This is the Practicad default elevation tag. There are separate tutorials on how to build these tags and how these tags work. Currently, we're teaching you how to use the ones we've already got. And there are going to be exercises on this as well. So we're going to say, let's tag it with elevation 0. We come over here. I'm going to put it on the drawing. And notice that when I go to place it down, it says bottom at 15 foot. What that tag is actually doing, and we will explain it in later tutorials, is it's taking the absolute elevation, top and bottom, of the entity we're holding, and it's subtracting the relative mark elevation. So it's saying that the bottom of duct, it's at absolute 35 foot, and then it's doing the math and saying minus 20 foot, and it's giving us the bottom at 15 foot. Same thing with the top. So the tag is actually showing us the distance between the bottom duct and our relative bottom point, or our relative 0 point. Whether or not this is actually set at relative bottom doesn't make a difference. The tag is actually targeting the 0 relative mark. In other words, even if this is set so it's not relative bottom, here you can see it's targeting this mark. This tag takes the absolute elevation and subtracts the relative 0 mark. So the first step on every drawing is actually to open up your drawing, find out what your new 0 is, or your new reference point, put it in as 0.0, and then set it to relative bottom to start. So let's continue to look at this. I'm going to use my elevation marks view to center from my highest point and my lowest point. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to place one more piece of duct above the slab by 5 foot. I'm going to grab this duct, I'm going to come down, and notice I've only got 3 values again. It's because we haven't set anything to relative bottom. We undid it. Second we check this to blue, 3 values appear. And now what we want to do is ignore the absolute 0 values. We're going to come over here and I'm going to say, let's put the next slab 5 foot above relative bottom. also known as 25 foot. But this allows me so we don't have to do the math. We can just work from relative bottom and forget about it for the rest of the drawing. I'm now going to take this duct, place it on the drawing. Now, if we look at this ductwork in front view, we'll be able to see this duct's at 15 foot. This one's obviously lower. Let's click on it and see what we've done. Right here, we need to change it back to 5 foot. And notice when we type in 5 foot here, it moves it 5 foot above the slab, or at 25 foot. And notice that this duct here is at 35 foot elevation, but bottom 15 foot. Once again, if we go to tag the ductwork using our elevation 0, the tag itself actually does the adjustment. So it represents on our drawing 5 foot as it represents 15 foot here. But our ductwork is actually at 35 foot and 25 foot from datum 0. So when we export this to Navisworks or use it for BIM modeling, it is correct. That is how to design relative bottom points.